speak to the family before they head over to the pool. We'll be doing that very shortly. But I'm going to get straight into it this afternoon. We've been hearing about the M1, the funding, the $1 billion that is on the table by the Turnbull government. That announcement made as I was going to air this afternoon. They're saying, as they have been saying since 2015, a 50-50 split with the Palaszczuk government. So I had our Transport Minister and Minister for Main Roads, Mark Bailey, on the program. Would he come to the party? Will the Palaszczuk government give way on the M1 and stump up the other half of the bill? This is his response.
It's a good start. But what we want to see then is the Turnbull government treat Queensland just like they treat New South Wales. The M1, just across the border, gets 80-20 funding under the federal government's own rules. In fact, the M1 at Gateway Arterial North in Brisbane, currently under construction right now, 80-20. For some reason, they think the M1 and M1 motorists aren't worth as much as motorists elsewhere, and we want a fair funding deal. So I'm happy to sit down with them anytime, anywhere, Ben, and talk through this. We've got some good funding on the table. We can get at least one of those upgrades. That'll be a third upgrade funded. There's enough money there to get cracking on that, and I think that they should be flexible about how they allocate that funding with our funding.
All right, well, there we go. So there, to me, sounds like a little bit of wiggle room. Yes, we'd like to sit down and start talking, but you know what? This talking has been going on since 2015. 2015, they've been trying to split the bill. 80-20, 50-50. Why aren't we treated like New South Wales? Well, Paul Fletcher is the Federal Infrastructure Minister. He's on the line. Minister, good afternoon to you. Is there some compromise with the Queensland government in the near foreseeable future?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that obviously today the Turnbull government has committed $1 billion to vitally needed upgrades on the M1 corridor, one at the southern end, vastly Lake Hugon, and one closer to Brisbane between 8 Mile Plains and Daisy Hill. The next point I'd make is that upgrades to the M1 on the Gold Coast-Brisbane corridor have been funded on a 50-50 basis between the federal government and the Queensland government, both under this federal government, a Liberal National government, and previously under the previous Labor federal government. So it's well established that on the M1 corridor, which of course runs through one of the biggest urban areas in Australia, that the funding is 50-50. The principle is pretty clear that in urban areas, the Turnbull government, the federal government provides funding on a 50-50 basis. In regional areas, it's more usually 80-20.
Minister, you just heard Mark Bailey then. He said, well, why an 80-20 split when it comes to the Gateway a bit further up, which is still part of an urban part of southeast Queensland? Why the difference?
Well, look, the principle is pretty clear, and consistently M1 funding Brisbane to Gold Coast has been on a 50-50 basis. Can I make the point that very shortly work's about to start on two projects, Mudgee Bar to Varsity Lake and the Gateway merge, one of them with $110 million of Commonwealth money, the other with $115 million of Commonwealth money. And when we announced our funding for those two projects in the 2016 federal election, the initial response from the Queensland government, from Minister Mark Bailey at the time, was we had this big fuss about what were the funding shares going to be. We said at the time it was a 50-50 proposal, and look, there was a bit of argy-bargy at the time. Pleasingly, we managed to get to an outcome, and as soon as the Commonwealth Games are over, the substantive work on those two projects is going to get underway.
And Minister, that's fantastic. It's going to get underway, but there's still about $800 million shortfall to get the job done. Is there room for the Turnbull government and the Palaszczuk government to sit down and come to some sort of agreement? If it's not 80-20, if it's not 50-50, that seems to be the budging point. Is there a 60-40 in you? Is there a 70-30? Something,
well, Ben,
anything?
My point is that, first of all, we've put a game-changing financial commitment on the table today. $1 billion to relieve congestion on two major projects on the M1 Brisbane Gold Coast corridor. That's thanks to the advocacy of Karen Andrews, Bert Van Manen, Ross Baxter, LNP federal parliamentarians on the Gold Coast and surrounding areas who've done a terrific job in securing this funding. Now, what I'd say is the last time that we made commitments to projects on the M1, it was on a 50-50 basis. We had a bit of toing and froing between the federal government and the Queensland government. Minister Mark Bailey and I had ultimately constructive conversations there, and the proof of the pudding is that work on those major projects, the standard work, is going to get underway very shortly. Now, I'm
excellent. And Minister, I just need a yes or no. Is there wiggle room for the Turnbull government on the funding issue, on how it's split?
Look,
or are you committed to 50-50 and that's it?
We're committed to 50-50. That being said, I look forward to constructive discussions with the Queensland Government and Minister Mark Bailey, because we want to put this money to work. The next thing I'd like to see the Queensland
So you're saying there's a chance, in the words of Jim Carrey.
We are focused on putting $1 billion to work to relieve congestion, improve travel times on the M1 corridor. I'm looking forward to meeting Minister Mark Bailey soon. I want to see the Queensland Government bring forward detailed business cases to Infrastructure Australia, just as they've done on previous stages of M1 upgrade. We're determined to get this money put to use, and what we've done is set it up so that this money could be ready to go in 2020 when the two projects that are about to commence next week get done. After that, then this money will be available for the next round of projects, because it's so important that the M1 is seeing continued growth in its capacity to meet the demand.
So. Very much so. I'll host you at my place if we need to. We've been talking about this for 3 years. I know you weren't in the role 3 years ago, but this is something that the Turnbull government and the Palaszczuk government have been butting heads about for 3 years. Can we just sit down and get it nutted out?
Look, and I look forward to working with the Queensland government, with Minister Mark Bailey. It's very important that we now sit down and work on this, but we've made a game-changing announcement today of $1 billion, and that's very, very important.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your time, Minister. We have to leave it there. Paul Fletcher, the Federal Infrastructure Minister. Maybe it's because I'm a glass half full guy, but I'm hearing there's a little bit of hope that maybe some sort of compromise can be made. But geez, they're taking their time about it. Imagine going to dinner with these two trying to split the bill. 3 years this has taken. They still can't figure it out. There's money on the table. It's going to start. Is it going to finish though? 131873. Actually, I want to go to Grant here. Grant, problems on the gateway. So at the other end of the M1, what's the hold up?